Hello, everyone on the internet, and welcome. Today's latest webinar is moving from monolith to composable architectures, and I've got some great guests with me here today. So we've got folks here, myself from Agility, we've got folks from Uniform, and we got headlesscreator.com. Let's jump right into it. So let's just, to meet our guests. Myself, I'm Joel Vardy. From Agility CMS. Agility CMS is a headless CMS. We're hosting this webinar today, and we're here with my friend Marcelo and Tim. Marcelo, tell me about yourself.
Hey, Joel, nice to see you again. It's strange being on the guest side. You were on the other side with me before, which I loved. You're a great presenter. I am the head of content and community at headlesscreator.com, which is now owned by Uniform. So that's what I do.
And Tim, tell us about what you do. You're from Uniform, and you have a long history in the technology industry. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Joel. I have yet to see your Headless Creator course, but I will see it soon, I think.
It's great.
Of course. Let's all say yes and clap for a sec. Okay, anyways. I do developer relations at Uniform, and I come at this from an angle of having worked at agencies for my whole career and just figuring out how to do the best tech for those clients that we worked for. And at Uniform, we have quite a modern approach to it, and I think it's kind of interesting to see how that fits to today's webinar. So I'm pretty excited to chat about all this stuff.
Awesome. Well, let's just dive into the content. For our agenda today, we're going to talk about what is monolithic architecture. What are we moving from? And we'll talk about what is a composable architecture. What are we, potentially moving to, and how does everything integrate within that composable architecture? Why would I migrate to a composable architecture, and how do I get started? So let's dive into the first thing, just what is monolithic architectures? So, from my point of view, from what I've experienced and sort of kind of pulling things off the internet to simplify it, it's a monolithic architecture uses kind of one mega platform for everything, usually requiring a large, often expensive application to run sort of everything that's on your front end, your back end, and in the middle. It tends to be expensive. So the cost of hosting and maintaining it can be very high due to the infrastructure requirements and other stuff and licensing. It tends to be more hackable, in my opinion, because it's a higher attack surface and it's usually older technology. And it's just can be really clunky. It's like a long time to roll out, difficult to change. You tend to get stuck with whatever version you got working. Tim, where do you come at this from in terms of your opinion of monolithic architectures and what they are?
Well, the interesting bit here is thinking about these systems. They sell themselves as we are pretty fast to market because they give you all these things already in this big box, right? You set it up. If you configure it right, it should do what it says it does on the tin, right? And it does. But if you look at all the services they have in their big box, not one of them can be amazing at 100% of whatever it is that that service should do, because their developer team has to build 15 services to probably 80%. And so you do get somewhere, but when you really want to create an amazing project with these services, you have to work at it long, and you have to hack it the tech way to kind of not like have security issues, but hack it in such a way that it looks the way you want it or that it works the way you want.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, the clunkiness factor goes up, because when you then do an update to your system, does the stuff that you did to it to make it yours still work, right? So there's some pros and cons to it. For me, mainly cons, but we'll see later if the new systems also have pros and cons, which they do, obviously.
Yeah, it is interesting to note that monolithic architectures tend to be older. They tend to be sort of a little bit more, they've been along. There are new versions coming out of things, but they tend to be sort of more legacy. Marcelo, where do you see this? Where do you kind of fit in with this?
Well, I remember when I was in some implementations of monolithic CMSs way back, 2008, even before then. The vendors used to say, "Oh, it's out of the box. The functionality is out of the box. Don't worry about it." But that really wasn't out of the box, because who would take anything that's out of the box and not customize it to be for their website, right? For their company. And implementing one of these things literally took, I remember being on a project that took over a year and it still failed. I mean, lots of money wasted, right? So That's one of the dangers of monolithic, right? I mean, there are some pros, like from the authoring experience, sometimes they get it right. But the negatives of that, even though the authors look at the authoring experience and go, look, I can just create a page. Well, the negative of that is that the content is not reusable, right? So I think that's the other problem with a monolithic architecture in general, is that content is not really reusable, and worse, not maintainable properly in a fast fashion, right? And that's important because if you have one of your visitors visit your tech support and they look at a document and that document is outdated, now it's completely off from what they're trying to fix. Now you have a frustrated customer, or worse, you have a customer that just that leaves your service because you're not supporting this. So I think that's part of the problem. I mean, like Tim said, there's positives and negatives. You can blame one company when something happens instead of others, but in general, yeah, it's a tough architecture to maintain.
Right. All
And
right.
you
So
cannot
let's.
believe how often I heard the words out of the box.
Out of the box,
Right.
oh, so
Every
Yep.
many
project,
times,
all
and
the
I would
time.
laugh at that. I would literally laugh because unfortunately, there are VPs in companies that go, "Oh yeah, see, they said it's only going to be 1 week, and boom, we're out and running." And I'm like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. And the box just keeps getting bigger, right? Just more
It's a very
things
big
that are
Yeah.
box.
in and out of the box. Yeah. So then flipping from the monolith conversation to what is composable, this is what I bring to it. So oftentimes we think of it as services based. So a system that you're composing can be built of independent services that can work together to solve your goals. That makes sense. And in theory, you should be able to get to pick what you need. So you choose only the services that you need from the vendors that you want to work with that solve the problem in the best way for you. And in theory, you should be able to. I've seen theory for all of these too, right? Because there's ways to do it the right way, and you're going to learn what's the best way for you. But this system should be able to grow with you. Your business is going to grow. Your needs are going to change. You should be able to adjust what services you use and how you use them without having to re-architect the entire system. And this thing should be secure and stable and scalable. That's one of the bigger goals here, is to make it. Oftentimes folks will say, well, we've got this problem with security, or it's like really slow, or it's not very stable, it's not scalable. Composable systems are built to be secure and stable and scalable, and we want to maintain that. Tim, does this kind of fit in with where you put a composable architecture, and what's your take on it?
It does fit for sure. And this is, you just described the most ideal scenario, and I love that. And we all want to go there. However, and this is not per se a con or a pro, it's just a different way of thinking. Because if you put together all these things that you chose, right, these services that you like, there is the potential to be composable. But if you just put them together and kind of hard code it in your front end that they talk together somehow, it's not actually a composable system, because it's
Right.
only composable when it grows with you, and then when you can change it up when that's needed, right? And so when you build something that is so tightly coupled and became kind of a spaghetti code base of your architecture, it's no longer divisible, right? You cannot just plug one out and put another in. And the
Right.
whole point of having this composable architecture is that the puzzle pieces are relatively small. They do their own thing in their own scope, which is great. They do that really well.
Right.
But if you implement these in a way that it's really hard to take them out, then suddenly, is it composable? Probably not. Like, real
Right.
composability is something where you can change things easily, and when integrating becomes really easy to do as well. But the
Right.
hardest integration to build is an easy one.
Right.
And if I can add something to that, I think part of the problem is this paradigm shift, in that people jump into composable system with an understanding of a non-composable system and implement it as a non-composable system. So
Right.
now they have headless and composability, the latest and greatest, and they're building a legacy system. They're
Right.
building a monolith, basically. And then they go, wait, well, what happened to the promise? Well, it's flexible, but you just did it the wrong way. And I'm probably gonna be saying a lot about paradigm shift and re-education throughout this
Hmm.
conversation, because to me that's the most important part of everything.
Yeah. So just to give an example here of what you're talking about, because I part of it is like the idea of it can grow with you. You pick what you need, and then you can change this as your business changes. This is becoming to be more adaptable. I think that's a really key part there. So say we're coming at this, we choose a headless CMS, we choose an e-commerce platform, and then we choose maybe a search platform to work with. And maybe the first e-commerce platform we chose was Shopify, and we've now hard coded all of the Shopify special stuff that they have, and we can't really change that when we want to choose maybe BigCommerce as a different one, or maybe we've chosen Elastic for our search and we want to switch out to Algolia, and it becomes very difficult because we've hard coded a lot of sort of vendor specific things in. Is that what you're talking about, Tim, in terms of like we can create spaghetti code that we didn't intend?
100%. And so what you see when it's not a big scale yet, this is very much maintainable and you have an overview because you just know where your code lives. The moment you start scaling, what you'll see is that companies have multi-market projects, right? And you might need a global CMS instance for your legal data, and then a local one for campaigns, and another one yet for something else. If you then also have Algolia, are you then going to implement Algolia with a connection integration field in those three CMSs? And how can people then actually, if they want to put products on a page from the CMS maybe, or if they are actually in your e-commerce system, how do they get CMS data? You're going to integrate three CMSs, and that's really hard to do, right? And then what you see is that you start doing it in code, and then you lose the flexibility of content editors. And they have to be in this very abstract place where they change one thing here and one thing there and hope that it works together. And so what you actually want to do is have all these systems contain your domain data. Your products are in your PIM, done. Your commerce engine deals with products that come from the PIM, but actually takes you on the journey to actually go to a checkout. And then you have a payment provider that might be separate again. Then you have your DAM for your images. Those things should not be integrated into each other because if you want to change one thing, it's basically impossible. And so what you want to do is have an orchestrational system that orchestrates your composable architecture. Oh, we're throwing words at it now. But so what you want to do is to be able to keep all your data solid as it is and simple. And everything that you do in your design to make it kind of, hey, I'm composing a page now with all this data, that's where the data lives for your design, where you say checkbox to make it big, or now it's a list, or now it's not a list. And I think, Marcella, you probably have a bunch to say there.
No, totally. I agree. I think, and that allows users that are experts in the PIM side, in the product side, can manage that content without worrying about, well, how is this going to be displayed on the website? Because you have your content authors that will just pick the product and add it to the website and augment it with some more content, but they don't have to worry about logging into that PIM, which I know we're going to talk about in just a minute, more about how to do all this, right? But I think it allows the experts in each domain manage their content through composability because they're all managing their systems. But then you have this orchestration system that an author can just put everything together and display the information.
Right.
So what that means is you need yet another thing, which is an orchestration platform that doesn't hold any data. It only points to the data. And there's my lovely plug into Uniform. I won't say more. But if you want to know more about that, go to Uniform and check that out.
Yeah, and I think this leads to a whole nother webinar, another topic about how orchestration is so important in a composable system. And we're focusing on kind of what is a composable system and how to get started on it. I think orchestration is a really big piece of that certainly we should all learn more about. So how does everything integrate? And I'm going to this is kind of both a history lesson as well as a sort of how do things work together from my point of view as a person who I am a developer, but I also talk to a lot of people from a business point of view and from hey, you need to think a little different point of view, which Tim and Marcelo are bringing us to. First thing I tend to think about are frameworks. A lot of this stuff has been enabled by modern frameworks, even though we've been able to do it forever. The modern frameworks give us these better techniques to make it easier to pull these services together into systems. And what are we pulling together? It's almost always headless APIs. Starting from headless CMS was kind of the first thing to become headless, but a lot of other things are becoming API based too, including commerce and search and personalization, all these other things. So those are the backends that are taken care of independently, so we can focus on the solution that we built with the framework. And then You may have custom service. Almost every organization is going to have something that's specific to them, some kind of technology that they have. That can be part of the solution as a service as well. And then we're going to deliver this on the front end. And we want to do that probably over a CDN. There's a lot of different techniques to do that, but we want to do this in a way that's really scalable and really secure. I think that's something that I always try to push forward, is this has got to be, job one is to make sure it can be secure and scalable. So there's kind of 4 pieces of how things can integrate together. Tim, give me your take on kind of these kind of things. And I know you've got a lot of experience. How has this worked for you?
What's funny here is, like, we talked about this before. Looking at these 4 pillars, they existed for a long time,
Yes.
right? And all these monoliths, you could make them headless. You just had to do the work, right? And so basically going towards the more modern systems, the more composable stuff, is like these frameworks, for example, they're great because we now tend to call these meta frameworks, because a framework could be something like, or a library like React or Vue, for example. But then you have these meta frameworks that go on top that make sure that you get all the tools that you need to make sure that your project has all the tools that it needs. Like, okay, we have routing for URLs now. We have a really easy way to query a headless system. We have a very easy way to cache them and to statically render it, or maybe dynamically render it, or do some sort of mix between the things. And we could do all these things 5 years ago, but now you do it in 5 minutes rather than 5 weeks.
Yes.
And all these headless APIs, when you look at them now, they're all on REST, right? And there's some on GraphQL even. It gets different. But that means they're following this structure. And I'm from the time where they said, we have a REST API. And you look at it, it's like, this is not a REST API. This is really hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're all just solid. And you have all these extra tools to make your custom services. And these meta frameworks are now also connected to CDNs. Think about Vercel and Next.js.
Yeah.
And so the life of developers within those 4 columns is so much easier now. And that's really where you want to be, because you have to know a lot of things, but they also help you with all these things. And you kind of Google how to do a thing and it's just there because one of those 4 pillars has it covered. I come from a time where that did not exist, so I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. And Marcelo, what do you bring to this sort of slide in terms of, how do things integrate? How does it work together?
So what's interesting, as an industry, we always have all of this. The integration is always on the technical side. I come at it from the authoring side, and I think it requires its own slide. And how do we integrate all of the authoring tools for a seamless experience for the author to be able to create and maintain content? And that's where I think it's an extremely important part in any project implementation. This is important. I'm not minimizing the slide at all. This is extremely important, right? Because this is going to power your site or your channels. We shouldn't talk about a site because we have many channels now.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, we need to have a similar slide and talk about how do we take all of these content tools and seamlessly integrate it for our authors to be able to create content, to maintain content, to share content, all of that. And that's more on the content strategy side, but it's also the technical side, right? Because one of the goals with integration is to let's get the engineers, let's get them out of the content equations. I know so many companies that you can't publish content to a website until the engineer presses the button on GitHub to get that published, which doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense. I understand why, but it doesn't make sense from the authoring perspective. So we need to think on the integration part. Let's think of the author as well and put him at the same level of importance as the technical integration.
Yeah, and in my experience, a lot of that comes down to treating the CMS typically, because CMS is where you click publish to publish things onto your website or your apps to get that out there. That's where people tend to build those integrations, maybe a custom field or some kind of sidebar integration to show what's going on. And there's a lot of different ways to tackle that. And I think it's something really important, Marcelo, to focus on. It's like, what is the main tool that the team is using to author content, and how do we make their life easier and better? So that's really important. So why should I migrate to Composable? So I believe if you want complete control over your content model, the actual pieces of content that you have available to share throughout your system, you want to waste less time, waste less money on features you don't use. You want to deliver things faster, better customer user experience. I believe those are the reasons that, that's why you should migrate to a composable architecture. You get complete control, deliver it faster, at a better UX. That's the utopia. And I believe, in my experience, especially with some of the more recent projects that I've seen being implemented, that's what people are looking for, and that's what they see as success. Tim, in terms of, I'm sure you see this a lot of times with your customers and with people that in the industry. What are the reasons that you give to people to migrate to composable, and sort of what are the feelings that you're seeing?
Well, interestingly, I've recently learned new things about this, as recent as yesterday, because I am a developer, but I've been at higher levels kind of with business. So I kind of always had this business hat on a little, but I was still also like, let's just build the best front end, whatever channel it is, for a user. No matter what you do, that's first. But then I realized what I've learned yesterday for some use case, where basically in a monolithical system, if a business asks the IT team, I need this feature, when can you deliver? There'll be probably 6 months, or I don't know if we can, because it's a new thing that the monolith doesn't do. So do you go outside a little bit, build your own thing? Do you connect? It's hard. And so you're really able to win on the governance end of things if things are composed, because it's already a decentralized system, hopefully. And so now, in that use case from yesterday, it literally went from maybe in 6 months or to, do you want it this week or next? Which is amazing, isn't it? It's such a
Yeah.
change on the business. And the IT is almost now, rather than this annoying group of people that cannot deliver because of the choices made, now they are actually in the game again, and marketers start to like them again, which is a huge thing for people to work together and be happy, because you just get better work. And mainly next to those two things, what you can do is really think, what do I need? Do I
Right.
really need that extra functionality that's in that bigger system, or is it just FOMO kind of thing? And generally, you don't. And your MVPs can get smaller and therefore
Right.
easier to build. And your user
Yeah.
stories are being written by the features that these smaller headless tools offer you.
Right.
And it becomes an easier game. However, if you're not used to it, there's a bit of a hump to go over, because as a customer, as a person implementing this stuff, you have to do your homework more. You now need to know, what do I need really,
Right.
right? And which company offers that for me and has the right legal structure and has the right SLA for me. And so, as a company building their own brand, you need to know more. You need to
Right.
hire better people, or not better, like differently educated people
Right.
on what they need to do. And that goes for
Yeah.
content in the same way, right, Marcelo?
Yeah, totally. I mean, from my perspective, for number one, complete control, you obviously have complete control of your content, from every source to any source, right? From any internal source or external source where you maintain content to any channel that you want. And because you are creating structured content, you can focus on that. And then you are removing also the engineer from the content equation, right? When I say remove engineer, I don't want any engineers to get offended that we don't need engineers. We need engineers for everything. But I want to remove engineers from the content equation, right? They don't want to do that. They don't want to be creating content. They want to be creating cool code. So
Yep.
once you remove that, you have complete control of your content. You can deliver much faster that content, which also, if you design this properly, it frees up marketing to change. I wouldn't say better UX. I would say faster UX changes. I think because we could do better UX anytime. It just takes a lot more work to do it, right? But it enables faster UX changes. And lets the UX people focus on that, while the content people don't have to, because you're not integrated design with content,
Right.
completely separate.
There's no
Yeah.
more out of the box. How about that?
Yeah.
Thank
No more
goodness.
box.
No
Yeah.
more box.
So our marketing team, actually all of our teams can get a much better rhythm. I think that's one of the biggest things, is we can actually
Yes.
do work that we want to do, and we can do it with a much better rhythm, especially from as you were saying, Marcelo, from the marketing team. Okay. So I'm convinced I want to go composable. How do I get started? Well, this is how to get started. And this is one of the ones that we've focused on a lot. And I think that even if you were only, even if like you should always have done this, but composable systems, because we have to make choices, because we aren't presented with a box of features that tells us what our business needs. We need to actually look at the parts of our business that have the biggest needs. So that's, I think, always step one. And then part two, notice needs tend to come, I think, should come before wants. We should also talk about what do you want to change about your business, or about how your business and brand is represented sort of digitally online. And then we can start look at, okay, what are the services that can help deliver on those wants and needs? And then plan phase one. Look at that as you're saying, Tim. Look at that MVP. What are the what service vendors do I want to work with? How do we plan out this first phase? And I think it should be small enough that you can sort of see success in what you consider the near term. Maybe for you that's a 3-month project or a 6-month project. We don't want to start off with hey, this is going to be a 2-year project. That's who even knows what our team is going to look like all the way down the road.
It'll
We
be
have
outdated
our
by
team.
then.
Yeah, we have our
I've
team.
seen those
We can see
projects where they
success.
spent so
I've
much
been on
money
those
and it
projects.
took so long that the team internally had changed, and they're like, "We don't want this."
Yeah,
That's
that's
been
not phase one. Yeah. So
now
Tim, is this how you kind of help people to get started? Is this where you come from?
Yes, at agency we call this the discovery phase, and then sometimes you help your customer out if they haven't actually done that before, or they do it themselves, and then we just
Right.
look at it, and it can be relatively short if you are quite mature. But where the biggest problems start is actually plan phase one, because because generally you still have this monolith, right? It's running, you
Yeah.
make your money with it, you cannot just drop it, and you cannot just train all your content editors to know the new system immediately. So
Yeah.
you need to have some way to safely go and take small steps in parallel to that monolith still existing. And then, because the one thing that never works, we would love to do it as developers, but it never works for business, is a big bang release.
Right.
Right? Because then you have to wait a year to build the whole thing and then
Yeah.
really capture everything that your monolith is doing, even if you don't need those things. And so it's going to take a long time. And
Yeah.
so what we generally said to customers is, you know what, you keep using your system, and then we'll take small baby steps towards the new thing, and then we overtake page by page or component by component the old thing. And what we then would always sell in, you know what, you probably want a new design, right? So why don't we redesign your old system, and we put that new design also on the new things. And then when we swap, you don't notice, except that it's 10 times faster to load.
Right.
And then you have these baby steps until you kind of eat up the whole old system. And so that's kind of one approach. The other is when you have a tool like Uniform, Uniform actually integrates with these legacy systems.
Right.
And so your content editors can still, for a while, content edit in the old system, while Uniform just makes it into a content database that it queries from to build your front end. So you can go completely modern and then actually have Uniform still also read from the old system and read from the new systems. And then slowly but surely you can make it bigger. And then your old system just goes away. And I've
Right.
had a few projects where we did that, where they went from a 20-year-old ATG Java instance to Contentful with, I think, Coveo as a search engine and Nuxt.js as a front end. And that was gradually done in like 1.5 years. And the only thing people noticed is that the SEO was better and the UX was slightly the same because we redesigned everything step by step. But it just became so much faster and so much cheaper to operate. And that's a hard thing to do, because
Yeah.
how do you govern that? But that's
Right.
the way to go, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
We've seen that at Agility too, where folks have had like an old .NET site that it's doing a lot of different things, and it's got a lot of things that they need to keep doing, and they've moved over to like Agility, Next.js, and a couple of the things slowly,
Exactly.
page by page, using a CDN to kind of determine where things are routed and how
Yeah.
it goes in the back end.
Yeah, the DNS is
Marcelo,
there. Exactly.
yeah.
Sorry,
Now,
man.
Marcelo, this is like 0 to hero. How do you get from 0 to like, hey, we got phase one and we're doing it? What's your take on this?
Well, speaking of 0, I'd add a 0 bullet here. And the 0 bullet is, number 1, get a person that's leading this project, and you got to go sell this. You have to
Right.
sell this. And how do you sell it? You sell it by re-educating people, by really you understanding what composable is, what headless is, what structured content is, and you have to sell that to the VPs, but you have to go to your authors, to your developers even, so they understand how to implement this. But you've got to sell, hey, look, we're doing a new thing here. We're not doing a page-centric website only thing here. We are going to separate our design from our content. We're going to create a content model that will withstand all future iterations of redesigns, all future channels, known and unknown, right? So what does that mean? So you need to put together a plan that sells through education. So as you're selling this technology and this new paradigm shift and new way of thinking, you're also teaching people, because then those people can go and implement it the right way. And to me, it's so important to do that, because I've been in so many content modeling sessions where they call me and they go, can you help us redo all of this, because we're at a limit now? And I'm like, I look at their content model, I'm like, yeah, because you just built basically a legacy system here. But that's
Well,
because it wasn't sold properly, it wasn't taught properly. People just jumped in and did it. So that's my take on how to get started. Start with that, and then go through, well, or concurrently, your needs, your wants, all of that is very important.
Yeah, yeah. We got to think different a little bit and sort of
A
plan
lot,
for the
actually.
future.
you
Yeah,
might
yeah,
also
yeah.
need a champion in your organization
You
that
need a
really loves that
champion.
stuff and then actually takes a bit of responsibility and becomes the teacher.
Hmm.
And you need someone who loves doing these things.
Exactly. Well, somebody that loves it and really believes in it,
Mm.
right? Because that's the only way to be able to sell this. In my previous job, I was a content solutions architect. So I was in charge of creating all the content architecture, the content models, but a huge part of my job was just selling this stuff.
Right.
Just, and what I mean by selling, I don't mean like a typical salesman, right? Like through education, like teaching people. What does this mean? Why is this important? Show them. Don't just tell them, but show them through
Right.
examples. Put POCs together and go, okay, you see, this is the old way, this is the new way. You see the difference.
Yeah. Well, for those of you watching, we're here to help you be that champion if you want to be that champion, and to help you get started on this journey. I think this is a really exciting journey to move from monolithic to composable. It's a really exciting time to be in the industry. And certainly myself, Tim, Marcelo, we have our connection, so you can contact me. I'm at Agility. Tim's at Uniform. Marcelo's at Uniform, as well as headlesscreator.com.
Yep.
We're going to put our links and everything in the chat there, so you can click on those, and definitely, any questions that you've had, throw them in there, or connect with us on our various social channels or emails, that sort of thing, to ask any questions. Closing thoughts from you, Tim?
Not that many. I think we covered a lot. I loved your
Yeah.
questions. It was really great. I'm just excited to see where the market is going, especially on the technical side of things, and what it means for developers, because we're in this paradigm shift kind of thing. But let's say the shift is here, but then the people are still here.
Yeah.
And so we all want it, but we don't really know how and why. And this is why we are trying to establish this category with Uniform that's relatively new, which is this orchestrational thing.
Right.
Because I'm just worried that now all these boardrooms are echoing with headless and we need to go composable, and they're all starting, but they choose the things that they know, like Marcella keeps saying. And then you get this kind of Mac Mac Alliance type builds that are actually monoliths.
Right.
And if they had known about something like Uniform, that would be completely solved.
Right.
But there's a little gap that should be bridged, because now it's just okay headless, and then okay it's composable, but actually need to orchestrate the whole thing. And so it's going to take some time, and I'm really interested to see who jumps and how and when, and especially also, and that might be a little bit cheeky, but how will CMS systems deal with this?
Yes.
Because originally CMSs were the heart of the thing, where you implement all the things. That's where you press publish, like you said, and you will still be pressing publish, but will you then also have a webhook to other systems that then also publish?
Yes.
Or will you be inside and have integrations to the system? You take over their APIs. I just want to see how headless CMSs will deal with the fact that these orchestrational tools make them slightly less sticky, as it were, which is it's an interesting thing to see how that plays out, because you still need a great content editing experience, and CMSs are amazing at that.
Yep.
But you don't want to hard code your, let's say, your product and your DAM in it.
Yes.
And so I just want to see what happens. I'm very excited about our time
Yeah,
right now.
definitely. Me too. Marcelo, closing thoughts?
I'm totally excited about everything that's happening. I do want to tell anybody implementing a headless CMS project and the industry, don't forget your authors, because when all is said and done, they're the ones living with the system. And if you forgot them or didn't include them, they're not going to be very happy. And they're a very, very important part of the equation. So don't forget the authors, including vendors. Try to focus. I know we focus a lot on developers, which is important, but I think as an industry, we've got that down. We take care of developers. Let's start taking care of our authors too.
Love it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And because if we don't take care of that, we will get re-platforms all the time.
Yep.
Like, oh, this system didn't work for this whole group of people. Let's just do a whole other system.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if you have all these headless tools and you're composed and you do it right, you don't have to re-platform. You just have to change the one thing that doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
But if you don't think about your authors, that's never going to happen.
Love it.
Yep.
Great sentiments, great ideas, great thoughts. It certainly is an exciting time. Tim, Marcelo, thanks for joining me. Thanks you for joining us from wherever you're viewing this. Definitely want to stay connected, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.